engineer here at Xerion. I actually want to start by having everybody give yourselves a round of applause. Without you all, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be standing here speaking to you all. And that's not just for the customers, Z and Barrett, that's for you all as well. If I take myself back a year, the last Power User Summit, I was actually interviewing for this company. And so that was kind of a blitz. It was really quick, a lot of information, but what was really cool was through the interview process, I got to know customers immediately right off the bat, even before I was hired. I'm intrigued by customer stories. I think that that's where the real Dataflow automation magic is. The magic is not in the nuts and the bolts of the platform. It's in the fact that we're able to take people's stories, their questions, and then find answers and solutions to those questions and stories. So what I do here at Xerion is, as I said, I'm a solutions engineer. I work very closely with Barrett on training and onboarding. I also consider myself a very deep user of the platform as well. That was one of the deciding factors for where I wanted to go ahead and work, was if I believed in the software. And during the Power User Summit, that's when I made the decision that I truly did believe in the software. What I want to do today is share with you 3 stories. Each one of these stories is going to be about how Dataflow automation enabled big questions to be funneled down into requirements, solutions, and then ultimately an end result, a so what. The first story I'm going to share with you is actually a use case of my own. This is something that I did outside of, I guess you can call it company time, but still working with the platform. Ended up at the office many weeks. But I want to share that with you because I think that while we all have our own context, I want to give you all a use case that everybody can relate to. After that, I'm going to be sharing a story from Kibo Group. Ben is actually here representing Kibo today. He was in my certification on Monday and Tuesday. And so hopefully I'll do justice to Kibo's story and how we were able to help answer some of those questions. And then finally, I'm going to be going through a group called WSP, who I've been working with very closely over the last month. They do a lot of sustainability studies, and in particular with this use case, we'll be looking at forestation surveys. So, how many of you all have ever said this, where you say, I really need to watch what I eat? Anybody? A couple people, maybe? Yeah. No more? Lucky you. So, we'll backtrack over to about January. I've done martial arts all my life, and so I was looking for a new diet to try out. I'd come off from surgery the year before, and I wanted to find a way to kind of start my training again. And so I heard something called a keto diet. Mark, I know that you're a fan of the keto diet as well. And the premise of the diet is that you eat foods that have really high fat content and no carbs. And I thought, what the heck, I can eat that and I'll be okay? Doesn't sound right to me. And so I want to tackle this problem from a scientific standpoint. I want to figure out if this diet is going to work. Right? So is this diet working? That's my big question. It's a very broad question as well. But from that big question, knowing I wanted to tackle it scientifically, and knowing I wanted to use the software as well, this led me to smaller questions that I wanted to answer. The first thing I want to know is, what am I allowed to eat throughout the day? Some days are busy, some days are more relaxed. I needed a way of tracking what I could do throughout the day to make sure I adhered to the diet. The second thing was I wanted to know how my body processed different foods. Because this diet was such a drastic change, and because of the way the diet works, you just kind of eat categories of foods, I wanted to know more than just that. I wanted to know what types of foods in each category could I eat. I wanted to go deeper. And then finally, of course, I wanted to know if I was getting measurable results. And so those 3 things I was able to work towards a solution with using Dataflow automation. The requirements I had for my solution, I needed to be able to track my data 24/7. That means whether I'm in the office eating, or if I'm at home, or if I'm at a bar, or if I'm out at a stoplight, not while driving. I needed to track something that I was doing. And data collector / iPhone builder was able to accommodate that very well. I also needed to make sure I had minimal adjustments to the data. I didn't want to log a bunch of stuff and then spend 30 minutes that night fixing it. I didn't want to have to do that manual manipulation. That had to be automated. Otherwise, I knew I wasn't going to continue using the software. And then finally, I wanted to make sure that I was able to get immediate feedback for my decision making. Like I said, I wanted to be able to get to 4 p.m. and say, okay, this is what I ate, that I can't have, this I can have. That was also going to help me be successful. My solution looked something like this. I had a very simple form it captured 3 different types of data. I either took a blood reading, I logged in the food I was eating, or I just took a weight measurement. So 3 very simple pieces of data that I had to capture, and then I was able to push that towards these dashboards and reports that gave you real-time feedback on what I was doing and how well I was doing. I was able to figure out how much of the different categories I was eating. I was able to figure out if I should be eating now, if I need to stop for the day. And then an ancillary benefit was that this made me really, really competitive with myself. And so it really pushed me to do the best job with the diet I could. So the question is, how do we get from point A to point B? Because this form doesn't look like it's too complicated, and these dashboards were really, really impactful and meaningful. The answer is Dataflow automation magic. So in short, I'm not going to go through what the entire Dataflow does, but the big key points are it tracks every single reading that I take. If I'm eating a new food, it's going to log that so I can use that later on next time I eat it. If any of you have ever used any fitness trackers, sometimes you can look up foods, but the numbers may not be exact. I basically have a custom solution for myself. And then lastly, it's able to prepare and clean the data in a way that reports is able to use it easily. That's one of the things I know that Z talked about last year, was the necessity to process your data. It's not that we can't do reports or people can't do reports. It's that getting from A to B requires some manipulations, and you want to smooth that out. In my solution, what I ended up doing is I saw Dataflow automation as a data and integration management tool. What it was able to do was it was able to take the information I had collected, function as a pipe, again, connecting from data collection over to visualization with reports. It piped that data over, it converted date and time information for myself so that I could start calculating the differences in the times. And then finally, it was able to convert the nutritional information so that even if I ate 12 chicken wings that day, the next time I ate 7, it would be able to do that math automatically for me. And so that was very important for me to be able to accomplish. So what happened? Right? Everybody wants to know what happened. Over the course of 3 months, I ended up losing 30 pounds. That's not a testament to the software. Sorry, Z, that's me and the diet. But there were more things than just that. And I do think that this was a testament to the software. The first thing was, because I was able to get such granular data, it changed and modified my behavior. I found that I was able to eat certain things that meshed well with my lifestyle. I tried to still stay active. But if any of you have ever gone on forums or looked up dieting information, they give you this really broad, hey, this is going to fit everybody. And that's just a lie. It doesn't happen. But because my data was directly towards me, I was able to find a solution that was personalized and customized. And that, I feel, was one of the main reasons I was able to be successful. And then as I alluded to earlier, I became very motivated, mostly through a competitive nature, of wanting to stay disciplined on this. Also, I was pretty proud of my solution, so I shared it with everyone at the office. So if I cheated on a meal, I would have to log it, and I knew that everyone would see it, and I didn't want that to happen. So it helped with my motivation as well. So using the software, I was able to stay committed, I was able to achieve my goals, and I was able to share the story with you all. What I want to do next is move to my second use case. So this is going to be with Kibo Group. And the mission statement with Kibo, and their big question, is how do they reduce poverty and injustice, specifically in East African communities. And in order to answer this big question, Ben and the team at Kibo, their plan or their vision is to figure out if what they're doing really works. I think we all have an idea of what we want to do, and we assume that it's going to work. But without actual measurable results, we don't really know that. The way they're implementing this and the way they're pursuing this goal is through documenting and sharing the stories that they have. So as I'm sharing their story, they also want to do that within their own group. Kibo is involved with a lot of different aspects in terms of improving or reducing poverty, from doing lessons within villages, as well as doing installations of wells and doing other sorts of outreach that they're trying to help the communities with. So Ben and us, we are working on solutions to collect data around these topics.
What they want to know is, are these interventions they're performing actually causing a difference? Are there measurable results? Moreover, they also want to be able to involve the other people who are around this effort. Kibo is fortunate enough to have benefactors who will donate money to them and then help support them, and Ben and Kibo don't want to lose communication and touch with those people. However, they're also very busy. I'm sure that there's not enough hours in the day. And so they want to find a way to automate that process. They want to be able to get that done without it taking up the time that they're supposed to be using to fulfill their causes. In this scenario, Dataflow automation takes on the role of a task and integration management, or automator. So what does that mean? It sounds really fancy, but it's not too bad. What Kibo does is they're collecting data from 3 different points in time. They do an initial baseline, they do a midpoint, and they do a final survey, an endline survey. Additionally, they also have a daily log form they use to track each visit that they perform. What Dataflow does is it takes all of these efforts that they're doing, consolidates them, standardizes them, and then it's going to automate the integration with reports for visualization, as well as automate the sending of pictures to benefactors. So now that communication piece is being taken care of without any additional effort on their part. So what they're doing is they're going from data collection, which has to be done anyways, directly to touching base and communicating with their benefactors automatically. Right? So there's your Dataflow automation magic in that scenario. The so what here? I was speaking with Ben individually yesterday in between some meetings we had, and he shared with me a really interesting story, a really interesting aspect about this that I didn't anticipate before. And it makes sense to think, okay, are we being effective in what we're doing? I think that that's a logical line of progression. But what Ben shared with me was that the data that they're collecting and the efforts that they're trying to produce also have a secondary responsibility or role. And that is to make sure that they align with benefactors who see their same vision. So what's happening is they're collecting data, they are analyzing it, and they're connecting with those benefactors in a proactive manner so that the ones who agree with them will stick. And the ones who don't, whatever happens, that happens, right? But they'll be able to then, in the future, find people who agree with their vision, who share their story. Ben, did I miss anything here, or is there anything you'd like to add? Thumbs up? Okay. I think he's being nice to me because he went through my certification yesterday. All right, moving on to my third use case with WSP. Again, their purpose or their role is to improve environmental awareness. Their big question is, how healthy are our forests? So they're collecting data within each forest that they go to, within each site. Each of these surveys has a pretty arduous process in terms of collecting data on every single species and then doing some additional summarizing afterwards. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on plants here in front of you all. I don't know anything about plants, really. What I do know about is candy. So, one of the things that WSP needed to do with their form and their data collection was they needed to take all these plants, group them, and sort them. Okay? And again, not knowing about plants, we're not going to try to do that. But imagine if you had a bunch of M&Ms, and I told you to sort them by color, and then arrange them by size. Right? I think that's something that we could all try to do. Don't eat too many of them. But that was effectively what I had to do. And normally what they would do in their process is, after they collected all that data, so then at the end of the day, they would go back to the office, and they would manually do that, one species at a time, and try to figure out that arrangement. Now, I tried to do it on one of their forms that they gave me at the onset, and it took me about 30 minutes to do a pretty short form. And I thought, there's no way that this is the right way to do this. What we ended up doing was using Dataflow here as a post-processing pipe. So what this means is that they collected their data, right, using Data Collector, but then within the Dataflow, it's actually going to do that summarizing for them, not manually, automatically. That summarizing is happening in the Dataflow, so it doesn't matter whether they're online or offline. Once the record is synced, it happens automatically. The record is then updated. So even though the calculations are happening not in Data Collector, your form data still is all in one place. hence the post-processing. After it's been collected, it's then processed and updated. In addition to doing that calculation, and in addition to storing the record again, they also were able to recreate that sheet that they had, the internal summary sheet, so that they could then use that sheet and share it amongst people who needed it. I was actually also able to make some improvements on the original design. It's still a little bit in development, so I don't have it right here, but they're all very happy with it. I know that. I've talked to them recently about it. And going back to what Penny was saying about the relationship with customers, there's definitely a back and forth dialogue there. It's not like they have all the answers and then I make what they want. I try my best to give them contributions and my perspective, being an expert within the Xerion ecosystem, and then from there we work together towards a really good solution. The so what with WSP and their ecology survey is that before each site was basically a single tree, right? You can think of each site as being standalone. It was a one of, but now that all their data is together, and this is actually something we've talked about recently, they have this central repository of data, and so now they're looking into doing reports as well. This wasn't a requirement they had at the onset. This is something that has come up through onboarding. And they want to do reports in order to look at the forest as a whole and try to get data across multiple sites and try to get analysis and insights from that. So to me, the big takeaway here is not that data flow automation makes magic, right? The big takeaway here is that data flow enables us to be creative. Without the ability to be creative, we would not be able to work in a partnership and develop these solutions. So to summarize, I consider data flow automation, or I consider data flows as automation robots that solve human problems. Right? It is not a piece of software that is just going to, snap your fingers and then it solves one small problem. You've got to sit, you've got to understand the problem. And in order to do that, we need to know your stories. I need to know your stories so that I can help you figure out what type of solution you want to look towards. Those stories have also been the most rewarding part of what I've done over the last year, so I wanted to make sure that was the emphasis of my presentation. And what I would like to do is not only open this up to questions, but I'd also like to invite anybody to share their own stories. Even just from this short presentation and through this summit process, how you see data flow impacting your own workflows, and if there are any ways that, that we can work together. Lee?
Hey, John. The last use case that you were talking about, I think it's really cool how data flow is handling all the calculations. So it does not depend on the iOS or Android devices that you're doing. Working on chat, what I realize is when I'm testing customers' forms, sometimes the codes are not handled similarly on two types of devices. So when you move it to Dataflow, it's done by Dataflow and you just get the data from the devices and then you got the same calculation whether what type of device you use. And I think that's a really good takeaway from Dataflow. I think the use cases of customers that I've seen through tickets and things like that. So I think that would be really valuable.
Absolutely, yeah. So for the people in here who have built forms, who has run into issues where iOS and Android handle the forms differently? And who in here has run into the issue of having to write some page-level JavaScript that they kind of knew what they were doing, but they had to either jump on chat to ask Lee for help, or they had to really sit and dig to figure out solutions. Does that happen to anybody? A little bit? Yeah. And then the third one, who's ever run into the issue where the device may cache a value, take a value from it? That's just like me, right? So all three of those things were actually design goals I had when I created my solution. I wanted to make sure that we could alleviate and kind of move past those things. I see data collector, and again, this is partly because of my position coming in here within the last year and focusing on data flow, but I always think data flow first when I try to solve problems. But I see data collection as really just being collecting data that you need. I try not to do a lot of the advanced calculations and try to bend the system to my will because I have a more efficient way to do that within data flow. One of the other things I'd like to share actually is that Patrick and I were discussing during my certification how Concern has some old data that when they update their calculations, the old data doesn't have those reflected in them. The nice thing about having this done as a post process is you can send everything through your data pipe, even old data, and then have it updated as well. So that's another added benefit. Thanks, Lee. Appreciate it. Anything else? Any other questions or any other stories that you all would like to share?
John, what would be 3 things that there are 3 things that customers wouldn't know about Dataflow that you feel are kind of the hidden gems? And it's not like a seedy question, I'm putting them on the spot.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot. I think that one of the things about Dataflow that is really useful that people don't realize is that there are multiple ways to solve problems. I know we talked about this extensively during the certification, that the decision making is actually a big key. So in terms of reshaping that and rephrasing it as a gem or a value point, it's that Dataflow is able to be flexible. It's able to be flexible. It's able to allow you to be creative in your solutions. Another thing that I find really nice about Dataflow is that it functions as like an enabler. It empowers the other software to do more than each one is intended to do originally. The ability to update a record automatically has been really, really impactful to me. The ability to format my data so that my reports tables don't look too crazy has been really impactful to me. And then just the ability to have one small project and branch off of it later on has also been a really big plus for me. So like I said with WSP, I have this Dataflow built out for them that is just meant to handle data collector and documents. But then through discussions, they said, hey, why don't we try using reports? And it's not like I had to remake a whole new solution. I got to branch off of it and just continue with what I had already as they expanded what they wanted to do with the platform.
Putting on the spot. Yeah, good question. Anything else?
So
Yeah.
I know many of the people here have different backends, backends that will support with Dataflow. What would be your suggestions to them to still use Dataflow to support those backends?
Sure. So right now, Dataflow, we get a lot of people who send data to SQL Server, right? And in terms of why you would want to use Dataflow, Dataflow is going to make sure that your data gets there, and it gets there in the right way. So normally what will happen is, and Ziad talked about this before, when you collect data, it's going to be in a format that is good for the data collector. Barrett and I teach that during our certifications, during our trainings, that you want to think about the end user, the field inspector. But then when it comes to getting your data in a database or getting it to any other destination, those people want it in their format, right? So translating the data or reshaping it, reimagining that data is where the real power of Dataflow comes in. So you're not doing any sort of a substitution or an augmentation. What you're really doing is you are modifying your process. You are redefining
The way you can work with that data.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
I was going to say that the one thing about this that I think, and you just said, that's a critical differentiation when you look at it on the institutional side, is that the way organizations answer big questions right now is that they're reliant on transactional database technology that was released in the 1970s. They have gone through expansion after expansion after expansion, never reinventing the architecture from the ground up. And therefore, they can never answer questions from the business side, the operations side, the people who need to do the work. It always has to be translated by IT. They can't ask organically. And consequently, when people ask those questions, half the time is spent cleaning up the data in the system just so they can answer them. And you know, there's huge hidden costs with legacy technology. And I think that this is an important way to reinvent the way we, because we can ask natural questions.
Yeah.
And just like you know, we were using the forestry example, it's a global solution, but there's also a granular level of understanding of the micro issues if you need to go off some of the data. That's just what I've been thinking about Zerion in my good platform. I saw organic problem solving as opposed to broken data.
Sure.
That's it.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you, Rob.
Appreciate it. Yeah, and Rob and I have worked pretty closely as he's been trying to implement his solutions and going through the initial stages. We talk computers too. We have a good time. But yeah, no, I definitely agree that Dataflow is going to give you a central location where the problem solving takes on the face of answering human questions, right? And not, hey, my data is broken and I need to patch it back together so that I can fit it into this new system that works, but not with what I have. Yep, 100% agree. For my certification participants, after having gone through this for 3 days now, right? This is your third day hearing about Dataflow. How do you all feel about this? I mean, do you feel that Dataflow is able to address questions that you have, not from a technical standpoint,
But from a story standpoint, from an organizational standpoint.
I'll jump in. I'm going to echo what I said yesterday when we did the end of training. So this is really interesting for me. I was kind of like, okay, well, where are the best practices? Where exactly do I put this? But I think what John just said is, we can kind of do whatever we want with it. When I clean my data, I can do it in so many different ways. And so it's really about finding the best way for my data because it can be done so many different ways. And so we've kind of been having that conversation because our data's set is ginormous. And we just have so many documents everywhere. And so it's like, what's the best way to clean it using the Dataflow automation and also utilizing reports. And so that's kind of the conversation that I've been having with all you guys in the magical order.
Thank you, Kathleen. Patrick, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, the training was really great this week, and so I'm really looking forward to going back to start that. I'm working with Kieran, who's basically responsible for setting up our Dataflow before. I just feel that it's what Ryan was saying as well. Like it's really great to work together and kind of. Obviously, you guys are the experts in this area, and we kind of know what works better. So working side by side, having a good idea of what we're trying to achieve is great.
Thank you. Ben, what are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little weird for me, this whole conversation, because we're just getting started.
Right.
And so I don't have this, like, so many of you in this room started before there was Dataflow. So it's interesting for me to see, like, to be opening my eyes a little bit to the perspectives of, like, being able to pull data not just from iForm. Like, just today we were talking, well, we were sitting around the table out there and like, oh, I can pull data from like Google form too, into that, and still have it all in the reports. So I'm still learning it for sure, but seeing that there's a lot of ability to pull from all different sources.
For sure.
It's pretty big for us.
Yeah.
And what I would add to that is we're learning too. That was one of the things I shared during the certification was that when Kathleen asked about best practices, I said two things. I said, one, the best practice is that there isn't really a best practice. It's going to be dependent on your own use case. But then the other thing is that we're learning also. So continue to communicate with us and challenge us. I promise you I'll take it on as a very competitive challenge and I'll find a solution for you. But that's how both sides of the table grow.
Good stuff, John.
Thank you, Ryan.